Hey guys, Miss Kellogg here with your 7.02 Gothic Art read-along. The Gothic period began in France and spread throughout Western Europe. Gothic architecture is characterized by height and luminosity, which people believe brought them closer to heaven. Beautiful sculpture and stained glass fulfilled a practical purpose of telling biblical stories. Altarpieces emphasize the holiness of religious figures. Stained glass portrayals of biblical scenes, such as the one of the three kings in Chartres Cathedral in France, came to typify the Gothic period. Of course, here's where you can get your student guide and everything. The Gothic period in Western Europe occurred during the latter part of the Middle Ages, beginning in the mid-12th century. The turmoil of continuous warfare during the Romanesque period eased a bit, but the periodic war, famine, and plague life was still difficult and dangerous. Cities developed where artists formed guilds, each dedicated to a different craft. Powerful barons established themselves as kings over centralized governments. However, individualized cities and the Christian church asserted a lot of power. The church, led by the Pope in Rome, provided hope and touched nearly every aspect of daily life. Universities led by monks and priests taught not only religious studies, but also astronomy, philosophy, medicine, and law. The church became the major patron of the arts and funded works of architecture, painting, stained glass, metalwork, and sculpture. As cities grew, Catholic bishops commissioned the grandest of churches, the cathedral, as the seat where they preached and conducted church and civic functions. Gothic architects prided themselves in these imposing, elaborate structures that frequently took more than a century to build it. Citizens, rich and poor, helped pay for and construct these buildings. Additional funds came from pilgrims who joined to see holy relics enshrined in cathedrals. Cathedral in France is dedicated to Virgin Mary's, Mother of Jesus, and housed what people believed was a piece of linen cloth worn by Mary when she gave birth. Chartres. Gothic architects saw their cathedrals as new and fresh and worthy of being considered God's house on earth. They sought to design cathedrals so tall that they could reach for heaven. Gothic cathedrals is characterized by their simple geometry. Most are shaped like a cross, a symbol of Jesus' crucifixion. The main entrance was usually located at the end of the long arm of the cross. The altar was where the priest speaks, was the opposite end. Other entrances were located at the two sides arms of the cross. The west facade of the Chartres Cathedral is the main side of the building where people enter. The stonework about windows, called tracery, looks like delicate lace, yet the facade's vertical and horizontal lines give it the feeling of strength and balance. Number symbolism is an important characteristic of Gothic cathedrals, according to Christian doctrine, and the number 3 is a holy number, representing Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Therefore, a facade has 3 doors in the portal, grand entryway, 3 main horizontal levels, and 3 main vertical elements. Refer to the cathedral feature printout to see the appearance in the structure. Chartres sculpture stories in stone. During the Middle Ages, most people could not read, but they could read Bible stories told in the sculpted stone figures adorned a cathedral. Sculpture fills all parts of the doorway. The tympanum is the main area beneath the pointed arch above the lintel. The lintel is the horizontal band that runs directly over the door, and the archivolt is the concentric molding that echoes and frames the tympanum. The jambs are the vertical elements that flank the door. Medieval sculptors took the sculptural elements of classical Greek and Roman architecture to new heights by carving every surface. The sculpture provided a constant reminder of God's authority in heaven and the church's authority on earth. It encouraged people to live a Christian life. Explore some of these stories of stone here. Tympanum of the Last Judgment from Chartres, a Gothic cathedral, and the tympanum of the Last Judgment of Cathedral of Saint Lazare, a Romanesque cathedral. Gothic conventions in sculpture. During the Gothic period, styles changed from that of the Romanesque period. Gothic sculptors carved figures more realistically than Romanesque sculptors did. Still, their goal was to convey a religious message over the exact likeliness of the human figure. Where Romanesque figures have a mask-like faces, Gothic figures have features more identifiable with a specific person. What other differences in style do you notice? Entering the cathedral. Inside a cathedral, worshippers have felt that they and their prayers were closer to God because the atmosphere was one with height and light. The ceiling soared towards the heaven, and heavenly light streamed through the stained glass windows filled the nave, central area where worshippers stood or sat, adding a sense of height. And windows are pointed arches rather than rounded ones. Stained glass windows occupied the upper levels of cathedral wall, called the clerestory. The clerestory windows lead up to a ribbed vault ceiling that seems to mimic clouds. Beneath the clerestory windows is a long arched gallery level where priests and nuns walk and say prayers. Below the gallery is an arcade level made of more arches. These three levels express one number of number symbolism characteristic of Gothic cathedrals. Here this shows you each one. Stained glass was difficult and expensive to make. Artists began a stained glass window with a huge outline drawing called a cartoon. Then they determined what color of glass they needed to construct the window. Glassmakers made colored glass by fusing very hot glass with metal oxides such as copper to make red, iron to make green, and cobalt to make blue. They cut shapes from the sheets of colored glass and arranged them like giant puzzle pieces to form the pictures and designs. They inserted the individual glass pieces into a huge lead frame that they soldered together. From a distance, the pictures blur into a design of patterns and colors. Round window looks like a brilliant glowing flower, hence the name rose window. Up close, the pictures in the windows tell biblical stories. Explore the windows. Building at the cathedral, the walls that could support the height and weight of a huge vaulted roof was difficult. Piercing those walls with huge yet delicate glass windows added to the difficulty. A number of Gothic cathedrals collapsed during construction, but architects came up with a solution: the flying buttress. Flying buttresses have arches that lean against the outside walls between the windows. Each arch absorbs some of the load from the roof and transfers it to a vertical post called a buttress pier. Flying buttresses look something like a huge set of ribs attached to the building. Use a magnifier to locate the flying buttress in the Chateau Cathedral, which you can do all that down here. Look at all these different areas. Okay, here you can watch the video on the Chartres Cathedral. In addition to architecture, sculpture, and stained glass, altarpieces were used to inspire worship in Christian churches throughout Western Europe during the Middle Ages. An altarpiece is a work of art. An altarpiece is an artwork placed behind or above an altar where the priest stands. Italian painter Lucio di Buoninsegna painted Maesa altarpiece for a cathedral in his hometown of Siena, Italy, in 1308. The altarpiece consisted of numerous wood panels painted on both sides with scenes dedicated to the Virgin Mary, Virgin and Child, enthroned with saints in the front of the central panel and measured 7 foot by 3. Here it is right here. Figures in gold. To medieval Christians, gold symbolized holiness. To emphasize the holy statues of figures, Duccio used gold leaf for halos as well as to surround figures instead of placing them in realistic landscapes. To color the figures, he grouped minerals and mixed in some egg yolks to make egg temper paint. The yolk binds the pigment to the panel and gives the paint a shiny surface. He placed the most important figures in the center, and he made them larger in scale than the figures. He overlapped figurines to indicate space, but they appeared squashed and flattened against the picture plane. His characteristics served the goal of depicting Christian messages of making the scene appear above the earthly realm. Think about the similarities and differences between the early medieval style of Byzantine paintings and the later Gothic style. Then select and reveal to see suggested answers.
Water, look at that big whale.
Okay, then that brings us into the early Renaissance. I'll see you guys in the next video.